This is Nuance with Niki, the nitty gritty, even if it's shitty, where me, my cruise hair, and my 15 personalities just ramble on, and for some reason, more than 800 people are listening. I started this channel, first of all, to talk about pirates. Isn't that weird? I have a thing for anti-heroes and people that are misunderstood. It's a feeling I've had for a long time in my life. My favorite superhero is Catwoman, right? Because she's an anti-hero. I love people who are imperfect and trying their best, right? And I love trying to see things from their perspective. That's how I was raised by the giants. Okay, the giants in my eyes are South Africans. I believe I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I believe I am so blessed. And that is not an experience or perspective that I've always had. But my travels around the world, my troubles have taught me so much. So I just want to thank 850 plus people for listening to my weird ideas. Another reason why I did it, I really thought I would only ever have 30 followers at most. But I was hoping that the universe would perhaps send a message of love to the one or two people who might need to hear it. Okay? And I tried so hard to be polite and to show Mandela-ness for so long. And I tried to make the perfect videos. And the first time I was listened to is the time that I was the Murin. It was the time where Dricus du Plessis was called a pink pig. And Tyler in the same week was called an uppity African. So I lost my mood and I just spoke from my gut. And I thought I was being disrespectful, but actually I wasn't being that bad. I was just speaking back to bullies. And out of nowhere I got 11,000 views. And people liked it. Oh, that was crazy. And so it's been growing ever since. So over here I speak about stuff that scares me, conversations I'm actually scared to have. I toe a very, very fine line. And I do think today is going to be my riskiest video. Because I'm going to speak out against pretty much a lot of cuck, okay? I do not believe, disclaimer, that these people are cuck people. I simply believe that we all have flaws. We all have flaws. And I want to say that about anybody whose comments I have criticized. But I am so lucky. Guys, I'm so lucky to have this. I thought I was going to be piperag, which means terrified if I got criticized. But all it's doing lately is it's exciting me. It's exciting me so much to have this criticism, because for the first time I can actually say something that people are listening to, and I can speak out against the one thing I think has caused more destruction in this world, and I think it's the spirit of fear. And one of its biggest weapons is a really ugly word. Now, just become aware of your body, become aware of your arms or whatever as I say this word. It's a word you're tired of listening to. It's a word you're tired of discussing, and the world's, rhetoric around it has become so cheapened. Okay, that word is racism. Oh gosh, racism. Isn't it heavy just to say? What about words like knowledge? Just think about what that word feels like. Knowledge, light, love, joy, collaboration. I mean, for me right now, maybe you're not a kinetic person or kinesthetic person, my chest opens up when I hear that, and I hope to spread that feeling to as many people as possible, right? I don't think the world's perfect. I don't think my ideas are perfect. I don't really believe in absolutism, so this is going to be the trickiest video I think I'm going to have. But you know what? The weird mental health high I'm on right now has given me the chacharachness to think I can do this. Give me just a second while we're gonna roll my hair. I don't know why, for whatever reason I decided to do this quirky thing. Okay, so yeah. Oh, at Nuance with Niki, this is very unpolished. You see me in my most vulnerable state. You see me imperfectly. It's more like I'm your sister and you're just sitting with me having a conversation, right? We're just chatting. For professional version of Niki, for the Niki that's hiding behind a facade and facade management, well, one day I will probably be challenged, and there are probably going to be people who want to cancel me, and I'll send them right to my professional page. For now, none of you know my surname. But yeah, the haters can go there. Okay, but I actually believe that for whatever reason, there are more people listening to me than I thought was ever possible. By the way, thank you. Now, I have so many people to thank for this, but the one person I just feel in my spirit I need to send a shout out to is I Understood. Thank you, I Understood, for who you are. Thank you that even when I don't listen to your whole video, I just kind of play it in the background. you speak to the courageous person in me and you help me step out. Okay, so I just want to thank you, girl, wherever you are in your corner of the internet. You give me courage and I appreciate it. Now, what gives me the courage to speak out about so many different perspectives on race? Um, Purely the fact of who, when, and where I was born. I was born in a place called Hillbrow, Johannesburg, South Africa, in a time called 1986. A very volatile time in our country's history, as I understand it and as I have read about it, right? To a maverick family, a very weird family. And I have walked through this world in different people's minds as someone of very different races. In my lifetime, around the age of 6, I was told, "Hou jou bek, jou wit boer, jou rot," which means shut your mouth, you rat, you white boer. I have also been, it had also been said of me, is a piece of pussy worthless. That was by an American that knew that my husband was coming to Africa to come and marry me. I've also, in front of me, on video call, been asked by an African American, or her husband was asked in front of me, just make sure she washes. Of course, I have paid colored tax, but I've also paid first generation mixed race tax. So what happened there again? Oh, my family, when I was 4 years old, apartheid was not over yet. One of my cousins just was, the eldest cousin was making sure that the younger cousins weren't playing with me. And I honestly thought at the time that it was just because I was the youngest. Fortunately, I didn't grasp what racism was. This is my white family, right? And I just remember my auntie Eleni going, "That's your cousin." And I never internalized that as racism until I was older. I was accidentally put into the white class when I was, in grade 1. And so they ruined my marriage to Evangelos. Guys, Evangelos was my boyfriend from my first two creches. My first two creches. Do you know what I mean? And we'd been together forever, and our families decided that we were going to get married. And so we were in the same class, and we were sitting next to each other. And, he was my boy for show. And then one day the teacher said, "Niki, you're going to a new class." Now, I do not blame those teachers. It was 1993. The 1992 referendum had just been voted. This is where 70% of the white people in my country voted against apartheid. But the 1994 election had not yet happened. And so it was a very weird year. Chris Hani had his life taken, okay? And so it was a very volatile time. I do remember my mom being very nervous. She used to give me drills around, if there would be gunshots and that kind of thing every time we left the garage, right? And so it was a very volatile time. I have no blame in my heart for those teachers. However, to justify putting me into the colored and black class, they had to say that I had a learning problem, right? Because they had to put me a grade back. Grade naught was very unusual then, and so they put me into grade naught. And to make sure they didn't come across as racist, only one black child in our grade was allowed in grade 1. And then they had to say that I had a learning problem, which I then got diagnosed with, and I was given Ritalin, and to this day I don't know if I should have or not have been given that, right? I still consider myself privileged for that, because that province was called the Transvaal, and on the other side of the Transvaal, I want to say today it's called Mpumalanga or Limpopo. I've watched videos recently of a black child who would have gone to grade 1 then as they were desegregating classes, and they had to be taken in with armed soldiers. So it's relative privilege. That might not be privilege on a global scale, but that is how South Africa worked back then. Me being a Joburger, me being a Hillbrowian, which back then was like Santon, that was just, yeah. And so I watched as our democracy grew. I watched my country step into light and progression, while my immediate home, Hillbrow, further deteriorated. It had been the only place where there was a rainbow nation before the Rainbow Nation, and it was in this context that I was born. But I am the child and the grandchild of Mavericks. My great grandparents were the last interracial couple in their church to get married before the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act. They had to rush to now go and get married. So yeah, I stand on a long line of giants. What else did I want to say? It has been said of me Niki's just a lost little girl who doesn't know where she fits in. It has been said to me that God made the white man, God made the black man, but the devil made the colored person. And I was about 15 years old when I heard that. I was a Christian. So I was like, and I went to go and look into the Bible, and then I found plenty of scriptures which were very helpful to me at the time. But for now, that's no longer my spiritual belief. So I will be challenging one of the comments on my page. By the way, if you commented it publicly, I see no obligation to hide your name, right? And so this comment says, the ideology you believe that is of progressivism is a human-made construct, and that is holding back your mind. Sir, with all due respect, do you recognize that that sentence is a contradiction in term? You just said progressivism is holding my mind back. Progressivism, which means to move forward, is holding someone back. I'm going to have to challenge that. Okay. And so, no, sir, it's not my mind that's being held back. It is yours by a spirit of fear. I don't criticize you. I'm criticizing the sentiment. Whenever I attack anybody and their comments on my page, I want you to know that it's because it's one of these tired sentiments that I've heard time and time again, and I'm so excited to attack that spirit. But my channel is not against flesh and blood. It's against powers and principalities. I know that's a Christian scripture, but it's the best I've got right now in terms of vocabulary. I will be back in a second. Sir, I have copy-pasted what you've said. You've made a very bold claim. You've said there is no such thing as equality in the realms of nature or in the realms of man. It has never been achieved. Not ever in history or in the place or any place on earth, right? I see your negativity and I raise you this deliciously cheesy rainbow fart video of examples of things in nature where there has been plenty of equality and collaboration. I'll speak about it in the realms of man in a second. Certainly hope I don't get copyrighted.
People say that one and one make two, but there's something greater when it's me and you. When you're weary, I will share the load, 'cause we are travelers on the same road. Oh, how this crazy world can spin. So glad that I can count you in. Each other up and we'll be fine. Oh, how this crazy world goes by. So glad that you are by my side. You and me, my old friend.
1 point for Niki, 0 points for the spirit of fear that is holding someone else's mind trapped, who claims that mine is held trapped. No sir, no sir, I mean no hatred to you when I say that you are mistaken. And you go on further to say, and it is unfortunate, I was supposed to speak to you about places in history where society has thrived. Literally in every indigenous culture in the world. And I include Europe in those indigenous cultures in the world. Although it happened less recently, although a lot of this may have happened 1,000 years ago to the Germanics and to the Celts, and although it may have happened a couple of 100 years ago in provinces, in places further south, the truth is it is the spirit of dominance and the spirit of fear that separated people from nature. And as a child of many nations, a daughter of many nations, where my fatherland is the birthplace of Western civilization, and my motherland is the birthplace of humanity. My motherland, South Africa. I'm taking back our narrative, and I'm going to take accountability for those of my ancestors who have hurt each other, whether that crosses the color line or not. And I am also going to dispel as many myths as it is humanly possible for a sinner who's trying and who has only 38 years of experience on this earth, to dispel. So, no, sir, you are mistaken. There have been many matriarchal cultures in this world, in which collaboration was possible. The Khoisan come to mind. This was a society, at least Griqua society, in which there were no prisons, and children didn't even get hidings. Okay? Indigenous societies, whether they were in Europe or not, before dominance came to them and subjugated them, they lived in nature. They used things that were local. Of course, that was the only option, but they did. They were not people held back by a spirit of fear. They lived in balance with it. The animals thrived, nature thrived, people thrived. They had good diets and such, and they had what I consider better spirituality, right? And they named themselves after the land. Whether you think about the people who stayed by the Drakensberg Mountains and called themselves the people of the sky, the isiZulu, I'm using them as an example. Whether you listen to the poetry of Germanic people who might have called themselves Vandenberg, of the mountain, and so on and so forth. In a minute here, I'm going to read you a bit of mythology, Welsh mythology, a little bit unknown. Now remember, I'm speaking about the spirit of dominance, so I am going to take it further to rape. But I do want to show you a pre-colonial society, and I'm specifically choosing a European one for now. Everybody stick with me. I'm going to do the best that I can do in one video. It may get too long, so maybe I'm only going to approach European thought, okay? But I hope you stick with me. And I do see the subjugation of others as rape. I do see, for example, illegal mining as a form of rape of the land. Those kinds of things, right? If you don't get it, let it sink in. Let it sink in. And so I'm going to show you one of the lesser-known mythologies, which is how some of these cultures dealt with stuff. See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? All right, sir. So I am ready for you. I am going to do my best to tell you the story of Gwydion. It is going to be tricky for me because I am not Welsh and I have very little experience of Welsh culture. But what this mythology demonstrates is how indigenous cultures, whether European or not, had a deeper sense of fairness. I do not know why my spirit led me to start with Welsh mythology specifically, but I'd like you to know that just like Welsh mythology, which in the collective mind, collective consciousness, has been sent to the margins of society, so too African wisdom and African poetry. There is more wisdom in African words themselves than we have been made aware of, and we are robbed of this. I'm only starting to scratch the surface as someone who is so poor that I cannot speak Vernac while born on African soil. But for instance, I recently learned that the meaning of the word indoda, which means man, also means the one who stands upright. And that's an indication that in Zulu culture alone, there is a deep wisdom which, due to dominant forces and colonial forces, sorry to use the word, but the truth is what the truth is, many have now been removed from. And many in their own minds, because of internalized racism, have been taught to reject. And they are not the only ones, which is why I'm pointing back to at least 1,000 years ago when the same thing happened to the Celts. Okay, so I'm going to use this one bit of mythology, but I assure you that if indigenous people, that is those who lived in nature, if their narratives were centralized, we'd actually hear so many stories of a just world. Many places in the world have shown equality. Now, I showed you my unicorn fart, rainbows and light part by showing you the last video. This one is going to go to the dark part of my soul. I do believe in justice in context, okay? But I don't believe that the modern world, after this dominant colonial rape of society, of which my forefathers are responsible, and I have no idea who did it to them. Okay. Before our systems came into play or into place, and by the way, I'm part Celtic too. I come from the most genetically mixed race people in the world. Those are the colored people. Indigenous societies had a different sense of justice. So please excuse me if I mispronounce the Welsh words. So it says, soon Pryderi and his hounds and horses shrink to toadstools. He set off with his forces in pursuit, and Gwynedd against Math's greater numbers, Pryderi's men were massacred. To spare the remnants of his company, Pryderi fought Gwydion in a single combat and died. Okay, so we've got this battle going on. We've got this guy who dies. Now, amidst the noise and uproar, when Math was occupied with battle, Gilfaethwy sought out Gowan and raped her. It was a wicked deed and a mad one. Math, who could hear any whisper in the world, would surely find out. He did, and he caused Gwydion, and Gilfaethwy to come to his fortress, Caer and Dathel, to make reparation for the men and animals lost in the foolish battle, for the needless death of Pryderi and for the shame of Gowan. Okay, so his two sons come to him, right? And do you know what this guy does? He makes sure that for the next 3 years, I believe it is, they have to mate over and over as animals. He turns them into many different animals, and each one has to take turns being the female. As such, they are taught empathy because they really get to experience what a woman would experience in that point, and they have to keep giving birth to all these children, right? But they also experience cruelty, right? And so as cruel as this mythology may be, it's nothing compared to other mythologies, right? But there is a sense of justice. Today, sir, we live in South Africa, where a South African woman created an anti-rape condom, and South Africa refused to let her use it because they said it was inhumane, because what would happen is the tentacles would go into the penis. They said it was inhumane. You know what else is inhumane? Rape! And you know who never has to worry about an anti-rape condom? People who don't rape. Literally, would be no problem if people just didn't rape. Okay? So in a modern society, post-dominance, we are the ones who don't understand equality. Those who have been in touch with nature, though their stories may have been sent to the margins of society, though their libraries may have been burnt, though we are watching right now as an entire society's legacy is being burnt and brought to the ground. Right? Do not believe so quickly that things didn't exist just because there's no evidence at the moment, or very little evidence, because much evidence has been destroyed. And then for the things that do have evidence, they've simply not been given the dominant place in society. But indigenous cultures were deeply fair. So yes, there's been plenty of equality, and there is actually plenty of information out there and plenty of evidence out there, but it's often not the central narrative. So no, sir, you are mistaken. I don't expect everybody to believe me, but I do certainly hope that I am scratching at the surface of thousands and thousands of year-old narratives. Okay. It is an unfortunate thing we find more successful cultures being prejudiced due to that success being misconstrued as starting out in life better than other races. Wait, what? Misconstrued? Did he just say misconstrued? So, first of all, is this what you call a misconstruction? Is this what you call a misconstruction? Are they imagining this? Because you are the one who drives past hundreds of townships every single day, and there it is. I can already hear you going, but there are white poor people. That is true, but of course there is a disproportionate, an obscenely disproportionate amount of those. And if our argument is that white people in general have done better, then why is it that given the same circumstances, they are stuck in the same circumstances. So if you have traveled to where I have traveled, to the parts of America that they don't show on TV, such as Alabama, I have seen a poverty there equal, believe it or not, to black South Africans. I actually have seen that. Had you actually been to Alabama like I had been, you would have seen um, looks on their faces, sort of body language coming from them, an exhaustion coming from them, which until I saw it at the ripe old age of 24, I had only associated with black people. I then separated in my mind race from poverty because my life in Johannesburg consistently reflected back to me certain stereotypes, and I'd never deconstructed that until I was in Alabama. And you might go, those exist in South Africa. True, but also many of those are poorly dramatized adverts for the white genocide myth, and I am not denying that there are real farm murders here. But one has to admit that many of them are poorly dramatized, and that the people who pretend to be poor are wearing brand new pep clothing. So I've seen real white people in what is considered the wealthiest country in the world be exceptionally poor. I know it very well, right? I challenge you not to deny that this came out of the horse's mouth, the architect of apartheid, Dr. Henry Verwoerd, who non-South Africans who are watching this may not know. It said, Bantu education served the apartheid system. H.F. Verwoerd said the natives will be taught from childhood to realize that equality with Europeans is not for them. There's no place for the Bantu child above the level of certain forms of labor. Now, there are some incredibly intelligent black children in this country, but for the most part, when a person is intentionally educated to be on a certain level, that is what he will become. And in spite of that, as I said in my video, Give Black South Africans Some Peace, multiple black South Africans have raised incredible champions. You have personally watched that. You have personally watched that happen in your lifetime. Movers, shakers, Nobel Peace Prize winners. Out of the 4 we have in this country, are 3 of them not black? And these are only a few. As I said earlier, we're talking here about illiterate women who raised multilingual kids, a feat that people in Harvard, I said in this video, were not able to achieve. Okay? And here is the determination of black South Africans if your aim was to come for them. Okay, here is what I said in that video if you are new to my channel. Just give me a second to get to the place. It's about to come up any minute, and I trust that you'll be patient. Okay? Okay, this is all about how Siya Kolisi inspired a whole nation.
South Africa wakes up to the sound of the hadida. But before the hadida, parents wake up to wake up children. Before those parents wake up, the working class wakes up across the country. Before the working class wakes up, the taxi drivers wake up. But the first one to wake up here is the black South African woman who is making amagwenya, a fat cook. With one fat cook that she's going to sell at 3 o'clock in the morning to the taxi drivers, 4 o'clock in the morning to the commuters, 5 o'clock in the morning. She'll leave there 10 a.m. With one fat cook and a bar of Sunlight soap, she will raise lawyers, she will raise doctors, she will raise policemen and teachers. An entire country was built on black South African women.
So you have been to multiple White Houses, and I trust to many colored and Indian houses. And the unsung heroes of much of what we are able to achieve happen to be black South African women and men, because of the time that they free up for the rest of us. Particularly, with all due respect, white South Africans. Okay? And I have had these kinds of conversations where people go, well, what about the Jews? I would remind you that the Jews were paid reparations. I would also remind you that you are comparing people who have been free for only 30 years. I've mentioned it on my channel before. That freedom for 30 years means that born free South Africans have only been, the oldest ones, that's the class of 2012, have only been free and only been adults for 12 years. Given that time, they've done an extraordinary job. And remember that black South Africans did not start there. Okay? Perhaps you may have thought so if you were taught to mistake infrastructure for civilization. But they had thriving societies that we have been taught not to see that way. Okay? As for colored South Africans, to compare the achievements of a 400-year-old race that has only had 30 years of freedom to race groups that are thousands of years old, thousands, is obscene. It's absolutely obscene. Here is the accomplishment of colored South Africans, that in the world's most racist country, the world's most perfectly racist country, the most genetically mixed race people who have been referred to as everything from Kakakas, mixed race dog, Malau, half-breed, half-caste, the extras, the unwanted, whose narrative has consistently been diminished no matter what they have achieved. What they have achieved in this generation, while taking in the unwanted from all other races and giving them a home. The orphans of the unwanted pregnancies in a time before abortion was a thing. And many people classified as white in this country happen to be colored people or descendants of those who left their browner children with us. They have raised a ridiculously confident people, comparative, but given their circumstances. Not just that, our ancestors, such as Zwarte Maria, they were colored people, colored women that then married their slaveholders, and once their husbands died, they would take those same farms and make them more successful and more profitable than their husbands had in their lifetime. So if you are coming for the resilience and the creativity and the resourcefulness of black and colored people, I would ask you to contextualize it, but also not diminish it. The first veterinarian in this country, you know what, let me actually show you receipts. Okay, here's an example. My aim at showing you this is to highlight some of the untold stories. There are millions of them in South Africa that have shaped your perception that colored and black people have not done well.
To sell firewood to the people of Cape Town. She got into trouble with the authorities for this illegal road she made, but she didn't care. She was fierce. So this immigrant slave girl ended up owning 5 farms, 20 cows, 300 sheep, 6,000 vines, and the kicker, her son and her daughter would come to run all of Constantia Vineyards. When Thabo Mbeki opened the Cape Town Convention Center in 2003, he spoke about Zwarte Maria and said that she is an icon and one of our first successful entrepreneurs in South Africa. Today she is used as a beacon of hope and an example of what people can do. If they work hard, they can put a big difference between humble beginnings and a prosperous future. For stories like this and more, please join us on the Constantia Wine Walk.
We're going back, we'll just go back to the beginning.
Do you want to hear a story about South Africa's first entrepreneur, a self-made woman, one of the first children born in the slave lodge, and she went on to own all of Camps Bay? Her name was
Yep, a black West African woman owned all of Camps Bay once. One of our first enslaved people and South Africa's first entrepreneur.
Zwarte Maria, and she was a descendant of the Amazonian tribes of West Africa, and her dad bought her freedom when she was 8 years old. Zwarte Maria and her family bought a farm on Ruland Street near Parliament in Cape Town, and they grew vegetables there and then sold it at the market. Zwarte Maria was known for being fair and diplomatic, and their business grew. She then started a...
I'm seriously irritated by how this is not showing it from the beginning. I'll have to trim this bit out.
His first entrepreneur, a self-made woman, one of the first children born in the slave lodge, and she went on to own all of Camps Bay. Her name was Swati Maria, and she was a descendant of the Amazonian tribes of West Africa, and her dad bought her freedom when she was 8 years old. Swati Maria and her family bought a farm on Ruland Street near Parliament in Cape Town, and they grew vegetables there and then sold it at the market. Swati Maria was known for being fair and diplomatic, and their business grew. She then started a traveller's lodge near the castle, then bought 2 farms up the west coast near Darling, and then she bought all of Camps Bay and built an illegal road from Camps Bay into the city to sell firewood to the people of Cape Town. She got into trouble with the authorities for this illegal road she made, but she didn't care. She was fierce. So this immigrant slave girl ended up owning 5 farms, 20 cows, 300 sheep, 6,000 vines, and the kicker, her son and her daughter would come to run all of Constantia Vineyards. When Thabo Mbeki opened the Cape Town Convention Centre in 2003, he spoke about Swati Maria and said that she is an icon and one of our first successful entrepreneurs in South Africa. Today she is used as a beacon of hope and an example of what people can do. If they work hard, they can put a big difference between humble beginnings and a prosperous future.
Put a big difference between humble beginnings and a prosperous future. Our first entrepreneur was one of our first enslaved, happened to be an immigrant from West Africa, one of the mothers of the colored people, and also a black South African woman. I hope that's dispelling some of your myths. Let's go further. Our first veterinarian, a mixture of Xhosa and Scottish. Today he would have been classified colored, but he is something for black and colored South Africans, as well as his Scottish parents, to be proud of. Louis van Mauritius, our first freedom fighter in South Africa, lost his life. However, it is his story that began the talks against slavery in our country. Krotoa, South Africa's first diplomat, the mother of South Africa, she's often called, and the mother of the colored people and the mother of Afrikaans. She spoke 4 languages and she worked at the Castle of Good Hope since the age of 10. She was also the first legal interracial relationship, the first baptized South African of South African origin. Of indigenous origin, and she was used as an example of what would happen later, the stealing of the narrative of colored people. In the end, they would use rhetoric around her, something to the effect of, as a dog returns to its vomit, not taking her context in mind, as you have done in that kind of rhetoric. As I have pointed out before, of our 4 Nobel Peace Prize winners, 3 of them are black and 1 of them won it because of his collaboration with black people. So I share these things, some which you know, some which you may not, to point out the stereotype that exists in the minds of many people when it comes to colored and black South Africans. People who ignore that their narrative has been taken away. To this day, their accomplishments are diminished, even when they're right in front of your face. And as I said before, it's not like South Africans have gotten reparations for the things they went through. It's not like they got reparations. And remember that unlike the dominant cultures that you mentioned before, South Africans are aiming to do it without any revenge, without stealing anything from anybody else. Something which we can say are very few Europeans, and to be fair to Europeans as well, even the Ashanti Kingdom. You know, they had been oppressed previously, they then would go on to oppress others, and their legacy now is that they sent something like, 4 million people to the United States. Legacy now is that many of their own people have grown up as Americans. Very similar to how many people have grown up, colored people have grown up as South Africans. I don't say this as a thing of blame. I just wanted to use it as an example. But while I am going to draw parallels between white people and black people, one thing I'm not going to stand for is false equivalence. Because at this stage in history, not a previous stage, I'll give you that, not a previous stage, but at this stage in history, the scale, the difference is obscene. And I'd like to be fair to everybody. You see, sir, I do believe in equality, but I do not believe that equality is uniformity. Okay, I just wanted to see if there's any more that I want to just wrap up now. I think that given that it's about 40 minutes into my thing, we can pretty much stop here. Right? Starting out in life better than other races. So yeah, to wrap up, what I think I have tried, the stereotypes I think I have tried to attack, which I don't think will land for you the first time, for people who think like this. When you've spent decades thinking like this, being educated to think like this, I'm not sure how old you are, sir, but I imagine that you may have been one of those people who, even as a child, went to those camps, those summer camps, where white kids were taught reasons to be racist. It's very hard for me in one YouTube video to break a generational cycle like that, but I hope I've scratched at the surface of it. Black and colored people are much more resilient than you may imagine. Much of their success has been seen by you in your generation, but cognitive dissonance may have caused you not to see it. The idea that their circumstances don't play a part is ridiculous. I have shown how even when white people are in those same circumstances, they often achieve the same results. I'm just using white and black as an example. I have shown how one can't compare people who got reparations to people who didn't. One can't compare people who have acted in violence and retaliation to people who've chosen not to, who've chosen a much more complex place. I have shown how the idea that nowhere in nature equality exists is a ridiculous assumption, because it does. And do you know why it does for those animals? Because once a human being or a mammal's needs are met, they don't feel the need for dominance. They're not coming from a space of fear and scarcity. And so their spirits don't need to dominate others. And so they're able to work with beautiful collaboration. This happens within societies, it happens within individuals, and it happens within the very chemistry of your brain. It happens within the very chemistry of a human being's brain, right? That we have a reptilian brain, we've got a mammalian brain, we've got what do you call it? What was it called again? Just give me a second to catch my vocabulary. It's tough for me to multitask. Okay, let me start that again. We've got a reptilian brain. That's the part of us that exists only in fear. Then we've got a mammalian brain. Think of a lion or a squirrel. A squirrel thinks in terms of scarcity. I've just got to take. I don't care if I take from others. A lion or a predator believes I cannot survive unless I dominate others. Now, I'm not judging these animals for their behavior. It is nature, right? But then you move further up the line and you've got the primate, which is a mammal, but it's a more sophisticated mammal. It then has the sort of begrudging collaboration. However, it's able to survive and live on a higher level than other mammals because it collaborates. Now, human beings can still be stuck in this low level of thinking, depending on something called limbic dominance, or if we devolve, which we all do at some point in our lives, right? However, there is the prefrontal cortex, from a brain chemistry point of view, the highest part of our being. It is the part from which all creativity stems. It is the part from which all hope stems. It is the part from which all collaboration stems. It is even the part from which altruism stems. Altruism. And when we operate from that place, society thrives. Society thrives. All that has ever been done well in this nation, on this world, in this planet, in nature, has been from people who don't operate in fear, who don't let themselves be held back by narratives like that. It's people who believe that they can do that. And the one thing that has moved human nature forward is collaboration. From the time that the first sugar farmer collaborated with the first carrot farmer, or the first cow farmer gave leather to the first rice farmer, that was when society took its first step forward. It is collaboration. It is working together that has always done the best for us. It is dominating each other that may have, to some extent, enriched others, but also impoverished us in ways that we don't know, because it's robbed us of collective wisdom. Nuance with Niki, the nitty gritty, even if it's shitty, I get it. Not everything I've said is going to land here. I do encourage that even if it sounds weird and kind of out there, I have done a lot of thought about this over the years, and I hope that at the very least what I've done here is dispel many, many myths about human beings. Now, there's so much more that I'd love to say here, but I do think I've said enough. In how many minutes is it at this point? At the time of recording, it is now 44 minutes. There is a bit that I may have to squeeze out. But thank you so much to anybody who has stayed with me till this point. And ciao for now.